It started on a bright summer morning when the sound of tires crunching on gravel interrupted my quiet breakfast on the patio. I looked up from my coffee to see a familiar sight: Karen, the self-appointed ruler of the HOA, striding up my driveway like she owned the place. She wore oversized sunglasses, carried her clipboard like a badge of power, and had that same tight smile that meant trouble was about to arrive, wrapped in polite words. I set my cup down, already bracing myself for whatever nonsense she had cooked up this time. "Good morning," she said in that fake sweet voice that could peel paint. "We have an issue that needs to be resolved right away." I sighed. "Morning, Karen. What is it this time?" She tilted her chin toward the backyard. "The pool," she said sharply. "Several residents have noticed you haven't granted access to the community yet. The HOA rules state that all shared amenities must remain open during summer hours." I blinked at her, confused for a second before realizing what she was talking about. "Shared amenities," I repeated slowly. "Karen, that's my pool. It's on my private property." Her smile didn't falter, but her tone got colder. "Well, the previous owner allowed community members to use it," she said, flipping through her clipboard as if she had some kind of proof. "Therefore, it's considered a neighborhood feature, and by HOA standards, you're obligated to maintain accessibility." I almost laughed out loud. The previous owner she mentioned was my uncle, and he built that pool himself decades ago, long before the HOA even existed. He occasionally let his friends swim there, but it was never public. "Karen," I said patiently, "that pool isn't part of the HOA. It's on my deed. You can check the records." She looked unimpressed. "You'll find that the community sees it differently," she said with a thin smile. "And it would be best for everyone if you complied. Otherwise, we'll have to issue fines." That was the moment I realized she wasn't just asking, she was threatening me. I stood up, walked to the edge of the patio, and gestured toward the fence separating my yard from the rest of the neighborhood. "You see that line of trees?" I asked. "That's the property boundary. Everything on this side belongs to me. The HOA can't touch it." Karen's expression flickered just a hint of uncertainty, but she recovered fast. "I'll have to verify that with the board," she said briskly, turning on her heel. "But if you deny access, you'll be hearing from us again." She marched off down the driveway like a general retreating to plan her next attack. For a few days, things were quiet. I thought maybe she'd looked up the records and realized she was wrong. But then the flyers started showing up. First, it was a printed notice on my gate claiming I was violating community cooperation standards by denying pool use. Then a few of my neighbors started knocking on my door, asking politely if they could bring their kids to swim like before. It was clear Karen had been spreading her own version of the story that I was hoarding a shared neighborhood pool. I explained the truth to anyone who asked, but gossip travels faster than facts. Within a week, people were giving me dirty looks at the grocery store. By the second week, Karen was back, and this time she wasn't alone. She had 2 other HOA board members with her, and one of them was recording on their phone. "We're documenting this interaction," she announced as if I should be afraid. "The community has decided you are in violation of the HOA charter by refusing reasonable access to shared facilities." I rubbed my temples. "There is no shared facility," I said flatly. "This pool was built in 1987, on private land, which I now own. The HOA doesn't get to rewrite property law." She sniffed dismissively. "That's your interpretation. The board will review your non-compliance, and fines will begin immediately." I didn't bother arguing further. There's no reasoning with someone who's already decided they're right. But what really pushed me over the edge wasn't the fines, it was the trespassing. That weekend, I woke up to the sound of splashing and laughter. I walked outside and froze. 3 neighborhood kids were in my pool, and 2 adults people I didn't even know were lounging on my deck chairs. Karen stood nearby, supervising like it was her own backyard. "What are you doing here?" I demanded. She turned toward me, unfazed. "The community voted to reopen the pool," she said. "You can't stop residents from using common amenities." I couldn't believe it. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady. "You're trespassing," I said. "All of you. Leave now before I call the police." Karen laughed. "Go ahead," she said mockingly. "Let's see how that looks, a man calling the cops on his neighbors for swimming in what's technically their pool." The arrogance was unbelievable. I turned, walked inside, and picked up my phone. I didn't call the police right away, though. Instead, I called my attorney, the same one who helped me finalize my uncle's estate. After a short conversation and an emailed document, I walked back outside. Karen and her entourage were still there, pretending they couldn't hear me. I held up the printed deed. "You've got about 10 seconds to clear out," I said. "This land, including this pool, is registered solely in my name. Any further trespassing will be reported, and charges will be filed." That got their attention. One of the men stood up quickly, muttering something about not wanting trouble. Karen's smile had finally cracked. "You're bluffing," she said, but her voice wavered. "You can't prove it." I handed her a copy of the document. "Read the signature line," I said. "That's the county registrar's seal." She looked down, and I saw the realization hit her. Her face went red, then pale, then red again. Without another word, she turned and stormed off, barking at the others to follow. The kids scrambled out of the pool, grabbing their towels. Within minutes, the backyard was silent again except for the soft hum of the filter. That night, I sat by the water, watching the reflection of the porch light ripple across the surface. I should have felt relieved, but I knew this wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to back down after being humiliated. She'd probably try to twist things again, maybe file a complaint, maybe even call the cops. But I wasn't worried. Because what she didn't know was that I had something even stronger than a deed waiting for her, something that would make sure she never tried to cross that line again. I leaned back in my chair, letting the night settle around me. The crickets chirped, the trees whispered in the breeze, and my pool glimmered quietly in the dark. For now, at least, peace had returned. But deep down, I knew this was just the calm before the storm. It didn't take long for Karen to make her next move. Just a few days after I'd kicked her and her little HOA crew out of my backyard, I noticed a patrol car parked at the end of my driveway one morning. I was sipping coffee again, trying to enjoy a quiet start to the day, when I saw Karen standing beside the car, waving her arms dramatically while talking to the 2 officers. From where I sat, I could already guess what was going on. She'd actually called the cops. For a pool. I set my mug down and walked outside, calm but already annoyed. When I reached the end of the driveway, one of the officers turned toward me with that neutral expression cops wear when they're trying to keep things civil. "Sir, we received a call about a public disturbance," he said. Karen jumped in before I could even answer. "This man," she snapped, pointing at me, "is illegally denying community members access to a shared facility. He's also been verbally aggressive toward residents. We're worried things could escalate." I had to bite back a laugh. A shared facility, I repeated. You mean my backyard pool? Karen folded her arms, smug and certain she'd finally found someone who would back her up. The HOA has designated the pool as a neighborhood amenity, she said, addressing the officer like she was the mayor of the town. He's refusing entry to paying members. That's theft of services and community obstruction. The officer glanced at me, clearly skeptical. Sir, he said carefully, can you explain your side? I took a deep breath and nodded. Of course. The pool is on private property, completely outside the HOA's jurisdiction. I have the deed on file showing full ownership. The HOA can't designate something they don't own. Karen scoffed loudly. He's lying, she said. We have records. Everyone knows the previous owner made the pool available to the neighborhood. That makes it common property. I looked at the officers and said, would you like to see the deed? They both nodded. I pulled out the folder I'd started keeping by the front door. I had a feeling this day would come. I opened it and handed one of them the document. He looked it over, taking his time, tracing the boundaries with his finger. This clearly shows the pool is within your property lines, he said finally, looking back at me. Karen's confident smile faltered, but she still tried to talk her way out of it. That can't be right, she stammered. We have a community map. That the officer cut her off. Ma'am, that map isn't a legal property record. These are county documents. They take precedence. Karen looked like she'd just swallowed a lemon. So you're telling me, she said, her voice rising, that he can just keep it to himself? That's not fair. Everyone's been using that pool for years. The second officer, who had been quiet until then, spoke up. Ma'am, that may have been an informal agreement in the past, but it doesn't give you any ownership rights. You can't force someone to let people onto their private land. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. She was so sure of her authority that it clearly hadn't occurred to her that she was completely in the wrong. This is ridiculous, she said, her face turning red. We'll be filing an official complaint with the HOA board. You'll hear from our lawyer. The officers exchanged a look, the kind people give each other when they're trying not to roll their eyes. You're free to handle that civilly, one said politely, but there's no legal violation here. If you or anyone else enter his property without permission, it will be considered trespassing. We suggest you respect the boundary. They handed the deed back to me, gave a small nod, and got back in their car. Karen stood there fuming as the patrol car pulled away, and for a moment, it looked like she might start screaming again. Instead, she turned and pointed a finger at me. You think you've won, she said, her voice low and shaking with anger. But you don't understand how this neighborhood works. You can't just isolate yourself and ignore the HOA. There will be consequences. I didn't even bother replying. I just smiled, turned around, and walked back to the house. She shouted something else as I went inside, but I didn't catch it and I didn't care. I thought that would be the end of it. The cops had made things clear enough, I figured, and Karen would finally accept defeat. But if there's one thing I've learned about HOA Karens, it's that they don't stop when they lose. They double down. 2 days later, I got a letter not from the HOA, but from the county office. It was a notice of complaint alleging unpermitted construction and safety violations on my property. I could practically see Karen's smug face as I read it. She must have filed it out of spite, hoping to cause trouble. What she didn't know was that my uncle, the previous owner, had already secured every necessary permit decades ago. The pool, the fencing, the patio, all of it had passed inspection long before she even moved into the neighborhood. I decided to handle it quietly. I called the county office, explained the situation, and sent copies of the permits. Within hours, they confirmed everything was legitimate and closed the case. A few hours later, I got another knock at the door. This time, it was one of my neighbors, a quiet guy named Tim who lived 2 houses down. "Hey," he said awkwardly, "I just wanted to say, I think what they're doing is messed up. Karen's been going around telling everyone you're breaking the law, but I know you're not. Just thought you should know." I appreciated that. It was good to hear not everyone was buying her nonsense. He also told me something else. Apparently, Karen had been organizing a community meeting to discuss disciplinary measures against me. It was supposed to take place that weekend at the clubhouse. That made me laugh out loud. "She's planning a meeting about me?" I asked. Tim shrugged. "That's what I heard. She's telling people you're ruining the neighborhood spirit." I thanked him for the heads up and closed the door, shaking my head. She was relentless. But she didn't realize I had something else working in my favor. See, when my uncle passed the property down to me, he didn't just leave me the house and the pool. He left me the original land survey, and that survey showed something Karen didn't know. My property line didn't just include the pool. It stretched much farther than anyone thought, right up to the edge of the community park the HOA claimed to own. I spent the next few days preparing everything. I reviewed the documents, made copies, and highlighted the exact coordinates. I wasn't planning to use them yet, but I wanted to be ready. When Karen inevitably came back, and she would have proof that she'd been barking up the wrong tree since day one. The irony was perfect. She'd called the cops, tried to find me, and even filed bogus complaints, all without realizing that her precious HOA playground might actually sit partly on my land. That evening, I sat out by the pool again, the same one she'd tried so hard to claim as her own. The water was still, the sky streaked with orange as the sun dipped behind the trees. I took a deep breath, feeling that familiar mix of peace and anticipation. Karen thought she'd scared me by calling the cops, but all she'd done was dig herself deeper into a hole she couldn't climb out of. She had no idea what was waiting for her next, and when she found out, it would be far too late to undo it. The weekend came faster than I expected, and with it, the so-called community meeting that Karen had organized. I had no intention of going, but curiosity got the better of me. Part of me wanted to see what kind of lies she'd spin this time, so, around 6 in the evening, I parked my truck across the street from the clubhouse and walked in quietly. The room was already packed with neighbors, most of them sitting in folding chairs, while Karen stood at the front, clipboard in hand and her voice booming with authority. She looked like she was enjoying every second of the attention. "We all know why we're here," she announced. "One resident has decided he's above the rules. He's denying community access to what has always been a shared pool and showing blatant disrespect for the HOA and this neighborhood." A few people nodded, others looked uncertain. She was good at twisting words, I'll give her that. I stood near the back, unnoticed for a moment, until someone spotted me and whispered. Heads started turning, and soon Karen saw me too. Her smile froze. "Well, speak of the devil," she said, trying to keep her composure. "I suppose you've come to defend yourself." I stepped forward slowly, keeping my voice calm but firm. "Actually, I came to listen," I said. "But since you brought it up, I might as well clear up the lies." She crossed her arms, trying to stare me down. "There's no need to get hostile. The board has reviewed your case and determined that your refusal to allow pool access violates the cooperative spirit of our community. If you don't reverse your decision, you'll be fined and possibly face legal action. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. People looked uncomfortable. I pulled a few folded papers from my jacket pocket and held them up. "You're talking about cooperation," I said. "Let us talk about facts instead." I walked to the front and handed the papers to the nearest table, copies of my property deed, the original land survey, and a letter from the county confirming everything was valid. "This is the official documentation for my property," I said. "The pool, the land, and even a section of what you call the community park are all part of my deed. The HOA doesn't own an inch of it. Which means, legally, none of your rules apply." A ripple of surprise ran through the room. Karen's face turned red as she snatched one of the copies, scanning it quickly. This has to be a mistake," she stammered. "That land was designated as public years ago." I shook my head. "No, it wasn't. My uncle allowed public use out of kindness, not obligation. He even filed paperwork at the time clarifying that it remained private property. You just never bothered to check the records before making demands." Someone in the audience raised a hand. "So wait," the man said. "You're saying the park isn't HOA land?" I nodded. "That's right. Part of it sits on my property line. Which means every time you've used it for HOA events or maintenance, you've been technically trespassing." The room went dead silent. Karen tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. The power she'd been clinging to was slipping away right in front of everyone. I looked directly at her. "You called the cops on me, tried to find me, and spread lies about me to the neighborhood, all while using my property without permission. If I wanted to, I could file a lawsuit today and the HOA would owe me thousands in damages." For a moment, nobody moved. Then one of the board members, the same guy who'd been filming at my house a few weeks earlier, stood up. "Karen," he said quietly, "did you actually verify any of this before taking action?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again. "It was implied," she muttered. "Everyone knew, everyone assumed," he interrupted. "That's not the same thing." I could see the tide turning. The same people who looked at me like a troublemaker were now looking at her with suspicion. I almost felt a little sorry for her, but then I remembered the way she trespassed, the fake fines, the lies. No, she earned every bit of this. Karen tried to recover, straightening her posture. "Even if that's true," she said sharply, "you're still part of this community. You can't just isolate yourself and ignore the HOA entirely. We all live here together." I smiled slightly. "I don't ignore the community," I said. "I ignore the HOA's overreach. There's a difference. I don't stop neighbors from visiting. I don't cause trouble. But if you think you can control private land that doesn't belong to you, that's where I draw the line." More murmurs filled the room. Some people nodded in agreement. Others exchanged glances, clearly rethinking everything they'd been told. The board member who'd spoken before cleared his throat. "I think we need to review this properly," he said. "It seems we've acted without full information." That was the moment Karen lost it completely. "This is ridiculous," she shouted. "You're all letting him bully you with fake documents. The HOA exists for a reason, to keep order. Without it, this neighborhood will fall apart." She was practically shaking with fury now, her voice echoing off the walls. "He's manipulating you." I didn't even respond. I just reached into my pocket again and pulled out my phone. Would you like to call the county office right now? I asked. They can confirm it for you in 5 minutes. That shut her up. The board member nodded slowly. We'll verify it, he said. Until then, I suggest everyone respect his property rights. I turned to leave, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. As I walked out the door, I could hear the voices behind me, some angry, some embarrassed, some just confused. Karen's reign of control was cracking, and she knew it. She tried to call after me, something about this not being over, but her voice sounded smaller now, desperate instead of powerful. Outside, the air felt cooler, cleaner. The sun was setting over the valley, and for the first time in weeks, I actually felt peaceful. The next morning, I found another letter in my mailbox, this time, from the HOA board itself. It wasn't a threat. It was an apology. They admitted the pool and part of the park were indeed on my land and promised to remove them from HOA oversight immediately. They also mentioned Karen had stepped down as president, though I didn't need them to tell me why. Word travels fast in small communities. By noon, everyone knew about the meeting, the documents, and the fallout. Neighbors who once avoided me were now waving as they passed by. Some even came over to apologize for believing her lies. Later that evening, I sat by the pool again, the water calm and still under the fading light. I thought about everything that had happened, the confrontation, the cops, the meeting. All of it because one woman couldn't stand the idea of not being in control. I'd given her every chance to back off, to be reasonable, but she kept pushing until she buried herself. As I watched the reflection of the sky ripple across the water, I realized something: I didn't just win a petty fight with the HOA. I reclaimed my peace, my privacy, and my freedom from the kind of people who think rules give them the right to rule over others. For the first time in a long while, the neighborhood was quiet. No flyers, no knocks on my door, no more threats or fines. Just the sound of crickets and the hum of the pool filter. And even though I knew Karen would probably find another neighborhood someday to terrorize, I smiled knowing that, here in this valley, she finally met someone she couldn't control, someone who fought back and won.